Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dave Harradun from Web Seminar Productions, and I'll be your behind-the-scenes producer for today's Flexo Global webinar program. Just a few words about FlexoGlobal.com. Flexo Global is an independent web-based enterprise designed to promote and service the global flexographic industry. Founded in 2007, Flexo Global's web portal gathers flexographic printing information from all around the world and makes it available to all the members of the Flexo industry free of charge. I really encourage you to visit the website at FlexoGlobal.com for the latest information pertaining to the world of flexographic packaging printing. We've got a couple of great presenters here today, and of course our host for today's program is Laura Hatch. Laura is the creator of Flexo Global, and I encourage you to get in contact with her about anything at all pertaining to the Flexo community. She's really a great resource for our industry, and I know she can guide you in finding the information you need to truly make your flexographic process more successful. So, Laura, thanks for being with us today and doing such a great job leading the Flexo Global Web Portal program. The program is all yours. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Dave, and thanks to all of you for attending this Flexo Global webinar. We have attendees registered from 4 continents, and it promises to be a great program. Right now, I'd like to introduce our 2 speakers. First is Richard Black, who has been involved with the printing and publishing industry for more than 30 years. He graduated from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo with a BS in Graphic Communications and began his career working for several large lithographic printers in the Southern California area, holding positions of customer service, product planning, shift supervisor, plant manager, and sales. Prior to joining APR in the Flexo industry, Richard spent 17 years working for major manufacturers as a technical advisor, product manager, director of product development, and business development manager. He joined All Printing Resources in August of 2006 as Director of Digital Solutions, where he focuses on customer support and product development in the areas of color management, digital proofing, workflow, and CTP solutions for Flexo. Richard's involvement with the FTA includes First 4.0 committee member, speaking at both the annual forum and fall conferences, and co-chairing the 2010 FTA fall conference. Our second presenter will be Catherine Haynes, who has over 18 years of experience in the printing industry, including offset, litho, gravure, and Flexo. She's held positions in nearly all phases of the Flexo printing process as a technician and training developer for Clemson University's corrugated program, a mid-web F&K press operator, a laminator operator, a pressroom manager, and as a graphics coordinator and manager for a Flexo plant. Catherine is certified as a G7 expert by the IDEA Alliance, an implementation specialist by FTA First, as an expert-level press operator by the NCSS and Graphic Communication. She graduated with honors summa cum laude from Clemson's Graphic Communications program and has been a speaker at various industry and events at Clemson, an FTA session chairperson twice, forum chairperson for the FTA Forum, as well as a judge for FTA's annual printing awards. At APR, Catherine has conducted numerous training programs from basic to advanced on various aspects of Flexo printing and graphic design, and has created customized training curriculums for Flexo printers. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our first speaker, Richard Black.
Thank you, Laura. There's one thing that Laura forgot to mention. In my 30 years of experience, I started when I was 9, so that's where the 30 years come from. So thanks, Laura. Thanks to both Laura and Dave and everyone at Flexo Global for assisting in the webinar. And also, I'd like to thank everybody for taking their time out of your busy schedules to attend. When we look at color management, the word color management, traditionally color management is really thought of as more of a pre-press activity. If you look at different applications that show color gamuts, measuring devices, some sort of target, or we always see some sort of diagram with many different elements trying to come to a common color space and then be reproduced. But if we look at color management from the press room, you don't hear much about that. The only thing you hear about, except when we have these ICC characterization press runs, and unfortunately these usually come into the hit the press room with some sort of instructions or objectives, but usually it's just, hey, run this when you have a chance, which if you've ever done one of these, you know that's not what we want to do. But that's pretty much all you hear about color management actually in the press room. And kind of to illustrate, I did a little Google search on Google Images, and I just searched out the word color management. and seeing what kind of images came up. So if we just look at color management in the Google Images, we'll see a lot of the same stuff that we talked about earlier. So we see a lot of different color gamuts, pictures of devices trying to link to each other, some software stuff in there, and some more targets. But if we actually take the same Google search and just add for the Pressroom, you can see we get almost nothing related to printing. So a couple shots of a sheet-fed Pressroom and some measurement devices, and then, well, there's a good example. We get Snooki when we do it for the Pressroom. So that kind of illustrates my point that there's not a lot of marketing or products that have been targeted for color management in the Pressroom. If we look at ICC-based color management, and this is where you use profiles and that type of stuff, that functions mainly upstream from the Pressroom in the pre-press area. Ironically, when you talk about color management in the printing industry, one of the biggest objectives is to get better output from the press. But if you just take away the ICC part of color management, a form of color management has been in the Pressroom forever. Someone always takes ownership of the color management, whether that's the quality supervisor, whether that's Bob, whether that's the head pressman, but someone signs off on that color, and effectively that is the color management program within that organization. But in the last several years, now that color management actually works, the earlier days it was a little rough, but now it actually works. Now that it's become more familiar with people, more companies are focusing more on the Pressroom, and they're focusing on different tools specifically for the Pressroom, like new color management softwares. There's new measuring devices. And we'd like to talk to you about a couple of them. One is called Spot on Flexo. And then Catherine's going to talk to you about SpectroDens, a new spectrophotometer from Techcon. So Spot on Flexo is a new software tool that was designed specifically for the Flexo Pressroom. It was a collaborative effort between Spot on Press and APR. Spot on Press is out of Portland, Oregon, and they introduced a software designed for monitoring the G7 process in the litho world, and came to APR and asked, what does the Flexo Pressroom need? And so we worked together, we had some ideas, and we came up with Spot on Flexo. So when we look at why did we do Spot on Flexo, unlike the litho process that has individual ink keys to adjust density and ink and water balance that can control color, the Flexo press process has very limited color controls for the press operators. Because of the unique ink delivery system of a Flexo press, really the operator has 4 basic color controls he can do on press to adjust color. He can increase density, he can decrease density, he can increase pressure or impression, and he can decrease pressure or impression. But that's all he's really limited to. So ink density is the most commonly used color control in the flexographic Pressroom. So if density is the most commonly used, if I were to ask you, what range do you run process magenta? What density range? Or what density range do you run process cyan? Probably everyone would come up with relatively similar answers. Matter of fact, First 4.0 actually has suggested starting points for process colors. So rarely would you hear anybody say, we run our magenta at 0.75 or our yellow at 1.5. Traditionally, everybody is pretty well between the minimum and the maximum target here under First 4.0. However, if I ask you that same question, what density range should I run Pantone 1375? Or what density range should I run for the spot color on the APR logo, or Coca-Cola Red, or Pepsi Blue? If we go back to First, it doesn't suggest anything for spot colors or special colors. But the truth is that no one really knows. Considering all the unique substrates used in Flexo, virtually every spot color is an individual color upon itself. So really the only way that spot colors are reproduced right now is usually matched on a visual basis. And then maybe once they've got a visual, they take a density reading to try to monitor that. But if we look at one of the most well-known color references, Pantone, and I'm going to talk about the original Pantone matching system. I know that there's a new one, the Pantone Go, which hasn't seemed to have gone anywhere yet. And then there's also now Pantone Plus with some additional colors that they've put in chromatic order rather than numerical order to drive everyone crazy. But I'm going to talk about the original Pantone matching system. Since I'm an old guy, I can reference it. And thanks to the power of Google and young people like Catherine, they went ahead and looked up and found out that, yes, I actually am older than the Pantone matching system. So appreciate all that stuff, Catherine. It's a lot of fun having a lot of young kids working with you all the time. But if we look at the Pantone matching system, it's really a color reference guide. It tells you the formulations to reproduce the colors, but it doesn't tell you any density information. So here you have 1,114 solid colors, but yet when we go out to press, and the one control a pressman wants to look at is what density should I run it to, there's no densitometric information anywhere. And as a free little add-on, does anybody know what these four little squares under certain Pantone colors, you can see it's not under the 1767 in the middle of the screen, those actually mean that the color can be achieved in a CMYK color space, or you could run it as a tint. So those are in all of the Pantone books, but rarely does anybody understand what they are really used for. And while we're on Pantone, I have a lot of friends at Pantone, and I know it gets a bad rap. And it's real easy for everybody to kind of take a shot at Pantone and say, the books don't match, or they're inconsistent, or I can't match mine to my customers. And to agree, I guess I would agree. But let me just give you some food for thought. Suppose your top account rep comes in and just gushing because they got a brand new print job. And you say, well, what is it? Let me hear about it. He says, wow, it's 300,000 copies, but they say if it works well, they might print that 2 or 3 times a year. You think, wow, this is a big print job. What else is about the job? Well, it's got 164 pages. Wow, so a 164-page book, and they want 300,000 copies? Anything else special about the job? Oh, yeah, there's 7 different spot colors on each page, and the customer is requiring them all to match within a 1.0 delta E. So if you look at those specs, and anybody who's in the printing industry, litho, flexo, gravure, digital, those are daunting specs. 300,000 copies of a 164-page book with 7 different spot colors that all have to match. Honestly, anybody in the printing business, could we really do that much better than what Pantone has done with this book? So if we think of it more as a reference guide rather than an absolute, I think it would all be a lot easier. The other thing I'd recommend is they just announced Pantone Live right before Drupa, and that is actually going to be a whole new twist on how we use this Pantone book and reference guide. So these reference colors are just going to kind of tell you the difference between a green and a blue and a red. And Pantone Live will be a license that you obtain the actual spectral information from the Pantone color so that you have exactly what you're supposed to match, whether that's through an ink drawdown, a proofing system, or a printing process. So it's pretty interesting. I watched a couple of demos at Drupa, and I would suggest anybody Google Pantone Live and get some more information on it. Spot on Flexo is a new software that we introduced in 2012, the beginning of this year. And it was designed specifically as a tool for matching and controlling spot colors. Using spectral information from a spectrophotometer, Spot on Flexo's predictive analysis algorithm calculates the optimal ink density to print a spot color to match a reference color. And the software then would suggest with icons, up or down arrow, that would be a density correction to yield the best possible match to the reference color. But probably one of the biggest aspects of it is Spot on Flexo will display a red circle if you cannot achieve the desired spot color via changes in density. In other words, the pressman can't do anything but increase density or decrease density. So we cannot, with spectral information now, the software will tell you you cannot reproduce the color, so you need to reformulate ink. So after a single measurement, when you're on press, you would get instant feedback. If you had a red circle, there's no reason to continue on in the press. The pressman can't do anything to get this color to match the reference color that you want. You need to get the ink reformulated. So rather than spending hours and hours and hours and testing different aspects of it, in one measurement, the software will tell you if you can get this color by changing density on the press unit. So with that, let me give you a quick demo of the software. So I'll go ahead and launch a job that I've already created for you guys. And right now there's no data in the job, so I'm just trying to show you the user interface. And the left side of the panel here will show us the colors that we've associated with this job. And when we highlight a color, it will populate all of these other graphs. And in the center here, what we'll get is it'll tell us the current density that we're measured at, and it will tell us the current delta E away from our reference color, and it'll give us some sort of icon, and then it'll give us the predicted density to achieve the best delta E reproduction of the software. So let me go ahead and take some measurements. I've already created this job, and here's the three colors that I'm using in the job. And the software allows you to classify the measurements as make-ready or production. And so I'll go ahead and measure the white point. We always need the white point of what you're considering white, whether that's the printed white or a white tile you're measuring on. And then we'll quickly save this information, and it'll do a quick calculation. And now the highlighted color represents all the data that's populated in the chart. So you can see this first color where it's saying we're running at a 0.96 density, and we have a 1.05 delta E match to our reference color. So a very good color match. And then we're getting a green circle because on this job I set up user definable tolerances of a 2 when I want colors to be a warning of over 2, and any colors over 4 I want to fail. So since this is under 2, I'm getting a green circle. Now the software will always continually try to improve the match. So actually the ideal density in this job would be to run it a little bit lighter and we'd get even a better match. But 0.04 in density is probably within the normal harmonics of the press, so we don't suggest any changes there. And I could look at the next color, and we did a good job of hitting that. We've got the green circle. And then if I look at the third color, you can see we're running at a 0.58 density, and we have a 7.53 delta E away from our color match. But you can see also the icon is showing me an up arrow saying if I increase density to 0.87, I can actually get a 1.61 delta E color reproduction. So in this instance, we have the correct ink in the unit. We're just running it at the wrong density. So we would go back to the press operator, and this is where his skills would come in. We need to increase density on this job. Now that might be an analog change, that might be something with ink viscosity, pH, but something we have to change. But we can get the color. So we'd make an adjustment, and then we'd come back and do another series of measurements. And you can see on the right-hand side there's some metadata we can attach to each measurement. And we would just save this calculation. And now you can see we have all green circles. So the correction that we made in density was correct, and we have a very good color match. And then you can just easily toggle through each color to see how the colors are actually doing. So when you really look at it in the software, we actually have customers now who are running jobs based on the icons, not based on the actual numbers within the job. So I went ahead and took the liberty of doing some additional measurements to show you a couple other features of the job. So I did 12 measurements here. And at any one time, you can just hit this trend graph. And this gives you kind of historical perspective of the job. The black bar separates make-ready data on the left from production measurements on the right. And the bar represents density, and the red line represents delta E. So we want a low delta E in green bars, meaning we're at the right density. If you remember that first color, we had a very high delta E because we were in the wrong density, and we couldn't obtain it. So we made the ink change, or we made the density change, increased it, and we're doing great. This is also handy to see here. All of a sudden, we're seeing our delta E is raising, but as the density is dropping. So maybe that's some ink drying in the analogs. Again, maybe that's a viscosity or pH issue, but you kind of have a warning that something's going on here, and you need to check that. And then at any time, you can just go hit Reports, and you'll get a PDF summary of the entire job. You can drop in your own logo. The metadata that you attach to the color would populate in the little areas. And then again, you can see we have the black bar, which is make-ready measurements and production. But maybe that's great for internal, but to send out to a customer, maybe you just want to show production data only. So this is the same report, it just eliminated all the make-ready information. So that's a real quick overview on the software. So some of the advantages of Spot-On Flexo: it provides you, the operator, the optimal density information for a given spot color. So again, if you look at a Pantone book and you ask what density should I start running 485, no one will have that information. With one measurement, this is going to tell you where to start running that to get the optimal color reproduction, what density to run at. And we have quite a few customers saying, well, can I use this on CMYK colors? And really, when you think about it in Flexo, CMYK colors are basically, they are spot colors. Unlike litho, which uses very few CMYK variations within a print shop, Flexo can have several different yellows or magentas or cyans depending on the ink type, water-based, UV, solvent, and depending on what substrate it's going on. So yeah, this does a great job for spot colors, or CMYK colors, just as it does spot colors. The other advantage, we tried to keep the user interface very, very simple and easy to do. Again, there's a lot of data that we'd be happy to show anybody on the rest of those charts, but just imagine that if you're just a pressman, instead of taking a measurement and trying to read the LAB and calculating the delta E, all I have to do is, if I have a green circle, I'm in great shape. If I have an up or down arrow, it means I can get better. But if I have a red circle, I probably need to get the ink guys out there as quick as I can. There's no reason to go ahead and continue on in the press, because you're just not, based on spectral information, you're not going to obtain the color if you see a red circle within the software. So obviously that would save a lot of time and aggravation and provide some real useful information to the press room operator. A couple of the places we've done demos, people say, well, it looks kind of neat, but we have this already out on press, or we have some software out on press. And there are a lot of places in Flexo that have spectrophotometers, and they're hooked to software. But usually this is formulation software. So in no way are we saying that Spot-On Flexo replaces formulation software. Opposite of that, it actually complements the formulation software. Because formulation software is a great tool for creating and editing color standards. And formulation software can also take the data into then ink formulation software on how to create the ink or fix the ink. But formulation software is not really friendly in the press room. I have yet to see anybody running a spectro with formulation software that has press controls for L, C, or H, which are brightness, chroma, and hue. I just don't see a lot of chroma knobs on the press to increase chroma or to decrease the hue. So again, it's great software, but not used in a press room. Spot on Flexo uses the predictive analysis algorithm to provide the press operator with ink density. Again, his only color control is ink density while he's on press. More information can be found at the website, spotonflexo.com. Along with the information, there's actually a little form you can fill out, and you can get a free 30-day evaluation of the software. It's not trial software. It's real software that will time bomb off after 30 days. And then if you like the software, you just simply buy an activation code, and you're on your way. So that's it for Spot on Flexo. Catherine, I welcome you to give us a little overview on Techcon.
Thank you very much. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the Techcon device, which may be new to some of you. Some of you may already be familiar with this. I'll show you some of the new features as well that they introduced at Drupa. So for those of you who may not be familiar, Techcon has been around for about 30 years now. They're actually based out of Germany. So they have a very strong European presence already. And for those in the litho market, you may also be familiar. They have a pretty strong presence in the litho market. But they really just introduced themselves to the U.S. market about 5 years ago and have really, in the last couple years, really tried to focus in on the packaging and the Flexo markets. Now, when I first began exploring the Techcon products, I started to kind of mentally correlate them to another company that some of you guys may have heard of, Dyson. Does that sound familiar? In the case of Dyson, they didn't really invent the vacuum, but rather what they've done is to really challenge the status quo of companies like Hoover with a more innovative suction method and a user-friendly or eye-pleasing framework. So similarly, Techcon hasn't reinvented spectrophotometry or really changed spectrophotometry, but what they have done is to develop a far more user-friendly and eye-pleasing device that very quickly takes measurements. And so that's what we wanted to share with you today. One of the first things you might notice is that it has a nice curvature to it, so it very much lends itself to the palm, your palm. As you wrap your hand around that, your forefingers and your thumb kind of fit nicely to that screen. So it's got a very nice ergonomic design. It takes a measurement in 1 second. So conservatively speaking, we're talking that's 2 to 3 times faster, and that's conservatively speaking than many of the other devices that are available. Now you may notice on the side of the device, it's kind of hard to see in this image, but we'll have some other shots that will hopefully help you out. The aperture is located on the side of the device, so it's also very easy to position over the target. It's not hidden up underneath the device, which is why there are no mechanical moving parts. So I think this too also lends itself to making those very rapid measurements. You're not worried about clamping the device down, waiting for the measurement to take place, then releasing the clamp and waiting for it to appear on that screen. It happens all within 1 second just by clicking the button on the top of the right above the screen. Now, probably one of the more clever innovations is how they've actually integrated the calibration tile within the charging plaque. So for most of you who are familiar at all with any sort of densitometer or spectro-type device, you know that that calibration plaque is pretty much a critical piece of that instrument. Most of the time they're separate, but they're together. They're a married couple. They have to be together forever and ever, amen, right? So it becomes very critical to keep up with that, and oftentimes these calibration plaques or these calibration tiles can be easily lost or damaged. So I thought it was very clever that they've actually integrated the calibration tile within the plaque itself, the charging plaque. So it's not only less likely that you're going to lose it, but it also helps protect it from the press room elements. The battery life, 10,000 measurements per battery charge. So if you read the literature, it says you can take about 10,000 measurements on one battery life, which is very impressive. That's much longer than many of the other devices available. Now, I know Richard, I asked Richard, challenged him to test this out for us and to kind of keep track of his measurements, but unfortunately every time he gets up to about 8,900, he starts losing count and we have to start over. So we finally gave that project up and are just going to assume that 10,000 is approximately where we can go. Oh, and then, of course, it integrates with Spot on Flexo, which Richard's already highlighted for you. All right, so rather than continuing to talk about the highlights, I thought it would be better to actually show you a short video of these highlights and demonstrate them. One thing Richard didn't mention before he became a color guru, he was actually a hand model. There he is. So as you can see, his hand very nicely conforms to the device. And he'll push that green button there for us, and you can see it takes a very quick measurement. Again, 1 second, you have that measurement. This is the aperture, and you can see that would be very easy to line up over any type of target. Now, they come standard with a 3 millimeter, but you can also get them in 1.5. This is the charging base, and those are the charging contacts at the back of the plate. And what he's going to do for us now is actually calibrate the device. So you simply rotate out that calibration tile, expose it. He's going to toggle to the calibration tab for us, place the device down on the plaque, click the green button, you see it take a measurement, pulls it up, and there our calibration is complete. Very quick and easy. Now on the back of the device is the USB connector, and this is how you would connect it to a computer. And we're going to actually take some measurements for you here. So he's lined it up onto a target, and pressing that green button, you'll actually see those numbers change. So these are live measurements that he's taking. And every time he clicks that button, you can see how rapidly those numbers change. Very, very quick measurements. Obviously very easy to read as well. Now, again, I'll point out the fact that it's very easy to reference or find your reference and take a reference measurement and then compare that to your sample measurement and toggle between those screens. And of course, you know, the battery life on these things rock. So again, very easy to use, very user-friendly graphical interface. And one thing that you'll notice with a densitometer or with a spectrophotometer, the main thing that you're going to be doing with these devices is, first off, you calibrate the device, and secondly, you're taking reference measurements or sample measurements, and then you want to be able to compare them. So the three key functions of the device, calibration, sampling, and comparing it to a reference, are right there at the very top, very easy to access and toggle between and take new measurements into. So again, very, very user-friendly. Another neat feature of the device is its G7 functionality. So I know some of the other devices, and it's very easy to do this with just a densitometer. You can take your G7 measurements. So for those of you in G7, you're familiar with, or using G7, you're familiar with the HR and the HC and the SC targets, which are basically correlate to a 25, 50, and a 75% gray. So, you know, right now you can currently take any type of density measurement of the CMY overprints with any type of a densitometer. But what the Techcon device does above that is very similar to what we're doing with the spot-on Flexo software, is it actually gives you a suggestion on how to improve that match by adjusting the density of your CMY values independently. So I feel like that's very helpful for people that are actually using G7 in the press room, very useful to the press operators. So the last thing I wanted to do is highlight for you guys some of the new things that they introduced at Drupa for the SpectroDens, the new and improved SpectroDens. So one thing you may notice right off the bat here is that it's got that color screen. And I guess what's more fascinating than the fact that it has a color screen is that it's taken this long for a spectrophotometer to get a color screen. Seems like it would have been a natural fit, but finally it's here, so we're glad of that. And what we did while we were there at Drupa, we took some shots of the device actually taking some measurements so you can see what some of those screens look like. Now I'm leaving that first image up there because I wanted to highlight the fact that it's resting on a strip of targets. If you flip over the new SpectroDens, you'll see that it has wheels on the bottom of it. Now the first thing that popped into my mind was my son, and I think I blurted out kind of, I might have startled the guy that was demoing it. I blurted out Heelys, you know. So I think it's pretty cool that the SpectroDens now has its own set of Healy's. And this makes it an excellent strip reading device. So now you can just very easily glide it over that strip and take a measurement for a whole row of targets. The other feature I wanted to highlight was the Wi-Fi connectivity. So in addition to having that USB plug-in on the back of the device, it's now Wi-Fi compatible. So that's pretty awesome. And I think those were some of the big highlights from Drupa, some of the big highlights we took from Drupa for the new and improved SpectroDens. So with that, I think that wraps up what I had here for the Techcon device. And again, Richard and I really appreciate you guys listening. We'll open it up to some questions.
Richard and Catherine, thank you very much for a really great presentation. This looks like a pretty neat device here in the Instrument software, so we really appreciate you taking the time today to share that. First question is, what computer platform does Spot-On Flexo run on?
It's a good question. It is compatible with both Mac and PC. On the Mac side, it has to be, I think, 10.6 operating system and above, which means an Intel computer. And on the PC, it runs all the way back to Windows Server 2000. So we've tested it on every platform so far and been successful with it.
Okay, sounds good. Does Spot-On work with other spectros?
It does. As we mentioned, the SpectroDens is a spectrophotometer that provides spectral information. So other devices on the market that provide spectral information, and some of the manufacturers, it's a different level of equipment. But most of the major ones have been covered. So we validated X-ray equipment, Konica Minolta, Techcon, and the Spectro Eye that now is part of X-ray too.
So just a sidebar question there, Richard, that came in here just a second ago. Do you interface online with online spectral cameras like Quadtech, BST, et cetera?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I also forgot to say that we do the little I1 also from X-ray, does spectral information, so that one's supported too. At Drupa, we actually took a lot of time to go look at all of the new online spectros. There's quite a few of them out there. And anything that delivers spectral information could theoretically be put right into Spot-On. So the answer is, does it right now? No. Can it? Yes. And there have been some initial discussions with a couple of the manufacturers that have online spectros. One of the people demoing it, when we showed them Spot-On Flexo, they're like, we have all this data, but to be honest with you, we built the spectro. We really don't know what to do with all the data. So we said, well, we have a deposit for all the data that can be useful for the pressman. So I hope to see a lot of integration with that in the future.
Very good. Sounds good. How do I load my reference colors?
Good question. There's three ways. One, you can measure them in. So if you have your spectra that you're going to be measuring with anyway, you can just measure in the reference colors. Probably the single biggest way I've seen so far users, you can go to your ink formulation software and you have reference data that's in there from when they did the original ink match and the drawdown, and you can export that data as an .mif file, which is a file format from X-Rite. We can import an MIF file, so you get the data directly out of the X-Rite software into ours. We'll also be supporting CXF. The new CXF 2.0 standard is going to come in. And then the last way, if you don't have any way of getting the data in there, you can just enter the LAB coordinates of the reference data. That's probably not the best way because you're missing a lot of the spectral information, but in some cases that's all that you have. So those are the three ways.
Okay. What delta E formulas are supported?
Another good question. You writing these, Dave, or who's doing these?
Just keep coming in.
We support all of the main formulas. So even though we would suggest, just as the FTA has, using some sort of tolerancing formula, we do support delta E76 or AB, the first one, delta E94, 2000, and then CMC 2-to-1 or 1-to-1. So you have any of them to pick from.
All right, sounds good. Does the SpectroDens report spectral data itself?
Catherine, you want that?
Oh,
basically,
yeah.
I already answered it.
Yeah, I guess Richard's already addressed that. Yes, it does, and that's part of the reason, or one of the reasons that it works so well with the spot-on software, which requires spectral data. So, yes.
Okay. Let's see, a couple more questions we've got. Does the instrument support a UV filter?
It does.
It does, and it also has an onboard polarization filter, so that you can do that too if you want. Usually that's an extra. So.
Okay. Sidebar question came in. How many filters are used by Techcon spectrophotometers?
That's a good question. There's a couple different ways you can do it. Some use filters. Some use holographic gradation. And I think they're using a series of filters in very short bandwidth. So they try to cover from 400 to 710, I think, is their spec. So yes, they have. It is a true spectrophotometer. It's not like a colorimeter that's using just a series of predetermined filters.
Okay. Let's see. We've got a couple more questions that just came in. Last one is next to the last one. What's the size of the measurement aperture?
The standard size on that is 3 millimeters. Now, it can go down. I see another question's coming in about the smallest aperture size, which is 1.5 millimeters.
Yeah, right. Several questions.
Yeah, and they simply just clip on, too. There's a little set screw, so it's real easy to change the apertures on the thing. So when we had the bottom shot of it, there's just a little screw underneath there, and you just put it in. It pops right off, and you screw in the new filter size, or the aperture size.
Okay. Several questions have come in asking about what's the price, how much does it cost, et cetera, et cetera. You want to try and address that one?
Sure. We have the MSRP on both of them. The MSRP is a price that, as manufacturers, you put out there, but as customers, nobody pays for. So if you want to know what MSRP is,
right.
The software spot on is $3,995. And the Techcon comes in a couple different flavors. There's a base flavor that's just a densitometer, and then there's a mid-range one called the Advanced, and then the high-end one is called the Premium. And I'm pretty sure the Advanced is $4,750 and the Premium is $6,000. But you can also start off with one and advance to another. So if you wanted to buy the base version, and on our website there's a whole list of the features that are different between the three models. So along with that video that we just showed. So there's more information up there.
Okay, that sounds good. I think we've got a couple more questions that have come in. Let me upload a new slide deck here real quick. Let's see, that was about the number of filters. Here we go. We've got Spot On, but not the Flexo version. Is the Flexo version a separate program or an upgrade? And also, we use the i1 with Spot On. Do we have to use this, or can we use our X-Ride 530 with it?
Let me answer the last one first. Yes, both instruments are supported, so you can use the i1 or the 530.
Okay.
Good question on the Spot On. So this was a collaborative effort between Spot On Press and APR. And so if you launch the software, there's three icons. The first icon is called Analyze. That's the current G7 software that they're offering. Spot On is coming out with a Verify product. There's a couple on the market, but where you can measure something and verify it against something else. So that's coming in as version 2.0, and then there'll be a spot color function. So what we did is we wanted the spot color function first. So we developed the spot color function, and in Spot On Flexo, we can reverse upgrade if we wanted to go to the Verify or the Analyze. If you have the original version, when you go to version 2, Verify, or it's just going to be called Spot, will be an option. So there's going to be two families of software, but essentially they'll be the exact same if you had the full versions of both. So we just chose to take the Spot to market first. Especially in the Flexo world, it has much more meaning than the CMYK G7 stuff does right now, although that's catching on. And as they said, Catherine's our G7 expert, so she's been doing more and more of it lately.
Okay. Sounds good. Looks like the last question, and that is the spot-on read density in status E as well as status T.
Yes. Defaults to status T, which is US, but there is a status E for the European one, too. And then you can also determine, we default on the Spectro at the kind of the US, I guess, suggested settings of D50 illuminant and 2-degree observer, but if you wanted to change that, you can. You can do D65, and you can change the degree of the illuminant to 10 degrees if you want.
Okay. Quick question I haven't had a chance to put on a slide yet, but when measuring delta E for his sample, does a user use a Pantone color book or an ink drawdown?
That's up to the user, to be honest with you. We purposely didn't license the Pantone library within the software because really in Flexo, the Pantone library is truly a reference because it's printed on a white glossy paper that we rarely see in Flexo, and it's printed on an offset press, which doesn't make a lot of sense for Flexo. So we really use the Pantone guide as a reference to determine the difference between, let's say, a Pantone 300 blue and a Pantone 485 red. If you wanted to read your Pantone book in as the reference, you could do that. Most of the people I'm seeing are exporting their color data from their ink formulation in, or they're reading the actual drawdown that was approved by the customer as the reference. But you could do either one.
Do either one. Okay, good. Another quick question. SpectroDens, does it support the new M1 illuminant?
That's a good one. I think they mentioned that maybe the new one that's coming out in the Drupa that we saw at Drupa, Catherine. I can't remember.
Yeah, I think we asked that question at Drupa, but I'm looking through the specs right now on the current device.
Well, because I have the current device, and I know it's not in that one, so I would think they're going to include that in the newer one. Yeah, that's a good question, and that's something everybody should probably do some time and a little bit of research. They recently passed a new ISO configuration for the illuminant. So in other words, the color of the light that's coming out of the Spectro. Traditionally, all the lamps that we use right now are tungsten, which have a color wavelength themselves. And there was a big movement, gosh, it's been almost 10 years now, to be honest. They wanted to get the ability to put a D50 type light source closer to daylight in the Spectro. So when it illuminated, it was closer to what you're seeing in the viewing booth. This was really important to the litho world where they do a lot of proofing and a lot of the white paper has optical brighteners in it. So you would read the Spectro with a tungsten bulb and it wouldn't have optical brighteners, so it wouldn't excite the brighteners. But then you would take the proof inside the viewing booth and it had fluorescence in it that would excite the brighteners, and you get a different aspect. So part of that is the instrument itself, and part of that standard, or I guess in accordance with it, there's new bulbs that should be put in your viewing booth that have no fluorescence. So they've taken all the fluorescence out of the viewing booth so it doesn't excite the optical brighteners. I guess it's not the fluorescence, it's the colorants down below 400 that would excite those brighteners. But there's a new spec on that too if you want to Google that. It's new bulbs for the viewing booth. And I know if you want any information, I know GTI and Juice, they both have information on that.
All right, Richard and Catherine, thank you guys very much for a really great program today. I thought this whole thing really went quite well, so we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. Laura, thank you also for being with us today and really hosting a great web portal of flexographic information. And I would encourage everybody to, of course, go to the website at www.flexoglobal.com. So on behalf of all of our program presenters today, my name is Dave Harridan, and I'll be seeing you on our next Flexo Global webinar. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great summer. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye now.